Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano, and I'm going to talk today about fasting on a carb metabolism versus a ketogenic metabolism. So, this is more about intermittent fasting because the longer you fast, you will enter a ketogenic state. But I'm just talking about the practicality of both and giving you tips, even if you're carb intermittent fasting or not carb intermittent fasting. Okay, so I generally do two variants of intermittent fasting, one with carbohydrates and one with none at all. So either ketogenic or with carbs in place. I always tell people if you're going to do a fat loss diet, right, if you're doing intermittent fasting for fat loss and not the other benefits of cellular cleansing, hormone production, growth hormone, IGF-1, all of that, if you're doing it for fat loss, diet with carbs or diet without them completely. You never want to be in the middle. The middle is no man's land because in the middle, your body is bouncing around between both metabolisms. Now, there are ways that you can do that properly with bouncing around between both metabolisms. That's what a cyclical ketogenic diet is. And even though I much prefer the keto variants of intermittent fasting and basically ketogenic dieting most of the year, there are still ways to do intermittent fasting effectively with lots of carbs in place. In fact, if you are going to have carbs in your diet, you shouldn't limit them to being, 100 grams. You need to keep them low enough to get into ketosis or go the complete opposite end of the spectrum and go for high enough carbs that you always have energy even when you're fasting. So, before your body can enter a ketogenic state, your liver glycogen has to be depleted. This means your carbohydrate backup team, okay? This is the bench, okay? Your liver glycogen is the reserve energy for carbs, and in order to get in ketosis, you need to have that depleted. So, if you're on a carb metabolism and you decide to do intermittent fasting, if you ate a large amount of carbs the day before and then you fast, even though your blood sugar might spike the day before and you might be a little hungrier during the beginning of the fast, you'll have more energy stored in your muscles and your backup team and your bench, okay? So, when you actually want to go hit a real bench, you'll have enough carbohydrate energy stored in your muscles and you have some in your liver. So, if you are not at the point where you have a reserve team, so liver glycogen, and you ate 100 grams of carbs the day before, the next day, your blood sugar, you'll still have that same initial hunger because you spiked your blood sugar the day before, and then you're balancing out, easing into the fasted state. You're still going to be just as hungry as you would have been with, higher carbs the day before, more or less, but you're not going to have as much stored carb energy in your muscles and your liver. So the downside of intermittent fasting with carbs in place is that if you don't get enough carbs, you won't have as much energy and you'll feel weak. This is a very common problem for people who are trying to switch to a ketogenic diet because they initially will try to buffer their gym performance by having carbohydrates, and at the end of the day, they'll be keto 90% of the day and then they'll have a big baked potato before the workout. If you're not adapted, you can't do that. If you are adapted, you can do that, and that is called a targeted ketogenic diet. But you have to be adapted first. You have to do this for longer than a month, and you wouldn't have had this problem if you're already adapted. So, somebody who's having 100 grams of carbs per day and then intermittent fasting, their body doesn't have enough energy to be fully optimal on a carb metabolism, yet at the same time, they're just teasing their body and not allowing it to get into ketosis. So what you really need to do is pick one and make the jump. Either go higher carbs and try to balance out the blood sugar fluctuations that come with that, etc., or decide I'm going to make the jump and transition my body into a ketogenic diet. I generally always prefer the latter. I always prefer ketogenic dieting, and I do believe that it is going to blow up in popularity due to the new studies coming out on adapted individuals. Most of them were not on adapted individuals. They're on people who are still in carb metabolism trying to switch over to keto. But here's the point here. The point is, if you're going to do intermittent fasting or any fat loss diet, even though intermittent fasting is a dietary tool, not necessarily a diet, you need to pick one, carbs or no carbs. There are numerous benefits for going with no carbs, and it will be much easier and smoother of a time for you because you aren't going to be dependent on your appetite. You're not going to be having dramatic energy fatigue and drops in your mental performance and how you feel. You're going to feel way better if you decide to stick to the ketogenic approach, especially if you like intermittent fasting. But the more optimal way, if you had to do a carb metabolism diet, is to have more carbs, because that's your body's energy source. Your body doesn't care what the energy source is, it just needs enough of the energy source. And if you're in a keto state, you always have enough energy, because look at all the fat that we all have. You always have access to that, and you're in a better state to use that energy. If you're in a carb metabolism, you only have your stored carbohydrate, which is significantly less than the amount of fat we store. So, as I've said before, if you are doing intermittent fasting and you're not having enough carbs when you decided you want to use carbs, then what will happen is you're not going to feel good, you're going to be weaker in the gym, and you might attribute it to keto as the problem. But in reality, the problem is sugar. The problem is carbs, and that you don't have enough of them, because at the same time, you're in no man's land. You're not letting your body pick one or the other. This is ultimately a big problem for people making the switch, because as I said before, at first, they won't be able to commit to a long enough amount of time on keto, and then they'll start having those carbs in place. And doing that just puts them right in the middle of the no man's land. Typically, this is a problem for ketogenic diet newbies, right? But it can also be a problem if you're somebody who likes using carbohydrates in your diet and intermittent fasting. So overall, pick one or the other. I obviously prefer keto approach, but you do what you like and experiment. Try what works best in your lifestyle. I'm not going to say what works best for you, because there is objective science here. Keto and the fasting state are the exact same metabolically, and if you enjoy fasting, you really should be doing keto, because it's the exact same thing, except you can eat food during that mental and physiological experience. Beyond that, if you want more information on fasting and keto, or fasting and carb metabolism, leave me some comments, I'll answer you. Beyond that, my name is Anthony Romano. Thank you. Visit my website, romanoketo.com, for keto coaching and intermittent fasting coaching. And with that, and thank you. Ciao.